We have our last panel discussion, or our last session before lunch today. And it's going to be such an engaging session that you are going to forgive me for the fact that we do not, I don't think, we have handheld mics, but we're going to figure something out, and you're all going to be able to hear our next presentation. We have Dr. Nick Peters joining us from Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and he's going to come and introduce our panel that's going to talk about movement towards real-world quantum networks.
So while people are shuffling up, I just wanted to mention that, this is something that's been a very long time in the making. So the history of entanglement and quantum communications at both Los Alamos National Lab and Oak Ridge National Lab goes back to the mid-1990s and the early 2000s. That's when people were really involved in doing fundamental research. And then sort of mid-2000s, we started asking the questions, myself jointly with Los Alamos and Ray's predecessors, how do you make quantum communications work in real optical networks? And fast forward yet several more years, and then we found ourselves engaged in doing cybersecurity research for what's now Cybersecurity Energy Security Emergency Response for the Department of Energy, jointly with Quibitekk, Los Alamos, at EPB. And that's really been the synthesis of this panel and what EPB is now doing using just commercial technology. So not necessarily involving Ray and I, who are on the research side, but what we're able to do to sort of help them go down the direction that they've gone. So with that, I'd like everyone to step to the mic. We might as well go in order since they're lined up, and introduce themselves and say where they're from and what their role is in this quantum ecosystem.
And Nick, I think you should start that. Did you say that?
I think I've already been introduced,
Okay.
but my background is in entanglement generation in the early 2000s, and then I went and worked for Telcordia Technologies in the broadband optical networking department to figure out how to get quantum communications to work in real optical networks. And then I've been at Oak Ridge National Lab since 2015.
Thanks, Nick. Appreciate the opportunity to speak today. My name is Raymond Newell from the Los Alamos National Laboratory. I lead the quantum networking team there, have since 2014 or so. We've been working in quite a number of different optical communication technologies, primarily with, at least in our shop, in a cybersecurity and a computer security focus. One of many applications that we're currently exploring. That's been our bread and butter in this team for quite some time. Some years ago, feels like more than 10, in conjunction with our colleagues at Oak Ridge, we got to thinking about what are good application spaces for quantum secured communication technologies, and really quickly came to the realization that critical infrastructure protection, primarily for the national electric grid, would be an excellent place for us to demonstrate the utility of these applications. And there are a lot of reasons for that I think that we can get into here briefly. Right, in many cases, utilities have optical fiber already existing, which is, one of our necessary resources. Also, many cases have physical locations, substations, power control centers, in which our devices can already be installed. And they also have a need for long-term security guarantees, which is something that we feel quantum communication technologies can provide and can do perhaps even a better job than is possible with classical mathematics-based cryptographic algorithms. So on the basis of this, we began a program hand in glove with colleagues at Oak Ridge National Laboratory and utility partners, very quickly to include Corey from Quibitekk, and that's my segue.
Thank you, Ray. Appreciate that. I'm Corey McClelland. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Quibitekk. We're a quantum networking company, and we've been around for about 10 years. Been into a number of different things. One of the highlights here is the work that we did and are continuing to do at EPB in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where we've installed the first commercial quantum network for EPB, and I'll let Jed talk a little bit more about that.
My name is Jed Marston. I'm with EPB of Chattanooga, and we're a little bit unusual. You're used to hearing from national labs, and we're very fortunate to partner with several. You're used to hearing from technology entrepreneurs. We're actually a electric and fiber optic company that was founded in the 30s to provide electric power to a community. But we installed the first community-wide fiber optic network in the United States and launched America's first gig-speed internet with it, and kind of got the attention of the U.S. Department of Energy, which said, wow, we could use this as a living laboratory, especially since we layered on the most advanced smart grid distribution system in the United States. So over the last few years, we've done literally scores of projects with LANL and ORNL, including the one that we've been talking about, in which basically they were looking at this cryptographic technology using quantum, and they needed fiber optic test beds. So we don't know from quantum. We're really good at real-world fiber optics, and we joined with all of these partners and all kind of ended up winning a R&D 100 award, which is kind of normal for them, really weird for us. But it was still really good, and so we decided what we would do is take all that experience that we've gained, and one of the things that we learned is that while there are quantum networks, they're typically kind of in lab somewhere. They're put together to run a specific test and then taken apart. So what we decided we would do is take all the experience that we have gained through this and put together a permanent, purpose-built, commercially available quantum network. So literally, you know, if you have a technology that you want to run on a real-life quantum network, and Corey can talk in detail about all of the technology that's already there. The idea is basically, instead of having to build your own quantum network to test your piece of the puzzle, we've got, you know, the foundational stuff there. You plug in your technology, you run it. You have an opportunity to test the interoperability with other technologies, including you might bring a partner with you to run on the network. And it's a real-world network. It's software configurable. So very quickly, you can dial in your configuration. You can return to it 6 months later after you've run some other configurations. So it's really designed to accelerate commercialization in a very specific way. And with that, you're moderating, right? So I'm going to defer back to you.
So I guess this next question is really for Corey. Being small business involved in the technology development, I'd like him to say a few words on the challenges towards taking this stuff out of the laboratory and making it real.
Thanks, Nick. You know, we heard from the last speaker how important it is for the quantum ecosystem in general to take the lab experiments that we're doing and get it out and commercialize it. And that's what we've really done with EBB, is we've taken the quantum network out of the laboratory and into a real-life metro-scale quantum network. Some of the challenges we faced is, you know, very similar to any small company, right? It's funding, it's being able to get enough workforce to be able to handle the technology that we've been working on. And it has been a challenge, and it will continue to be a challenge. As again, what we heard from Dr. Ferris was the fact that to scale, we need more workforce. And it's everybody from a PhD physicist down to the technician level to get the equipment out in the field, and then also to productize it, to get it into a box that allows you to install it, and just like any other type of equipment that might be going onto a fiber network, it would be the same for any of the quantum technologies as well.
Thank you. So one of the most effective ways to commercialize technology is to have personnel exchange. And in fact, the CTO of Quibitekk used to be a National Lab employee at Oak Ridge National Lab working on entanglement. And so, you know, on the topic of commercialization, Ray, I'd like to ask you to say a few words about the challenges of commercialization and some of the mechanisms that you found to be most fruitful for doing that.
Thanks. Thank you, Nick. Happy to do so. Coming from a national laboratory perspective, you know, commercialization is not necessarily has not historically been seen as our main deliverable. And I'm very happy to see that that's starting to change. And actually, in the past 5 years, it's changed dramatically. We were excited to learn this morning about the announcement of the ETIP program from the NSF, intended to bridge the gap, the valley of death between folks in the laboratory such as ourselves. You know, we can come up with great science stuff. We're really good at getting funded to build things that have a single-digit serial number, and we have a lot of trouble building more than 10 of anything. And so I'm really happy to see, you know, recognition from the federal government that this is an opportunity for us to take that technology and move them forward through new programs like ETIP. That's a real excitement. I'm also really pleased to see a lot more interest from commercial sectors to be able to come down and reach into more what we would call lower technology readiness levels. Devices and instruments that have, you know, that exist in single-digit serial number devices. Things that we're building in the laboratory may still have some trim pots, some adjustments, a couple screwdrivers hanging off of them, and to be able to see the potential that exists inside of those, even before it reaches the level of integration, the stage of a mechanical, you know, a cute little package device in a butterfly pack that you can solder down at scale. That said, there are still substantial challenges to meet there. And I think Dr. Ferris correctly identified one of them is forming a shared vocabulary between AMO physicists who, you know, we love to talk about qubits and we just love to talk about, you know, T1 times, and we all have our jargon, we all have our nomenclature, and that's very, very different from the vocabulary of system engineers, production engineers, quality assurance departments. Good heavens, quality assurance, what do I know from that? But these are essential pieces that we need to be able to bridge the valley of death. And so I'm looking forward to seeing these really mature in the years to come. Thanks.
Okay, so we know how to do some things really well, and that can be deployed today. There are some things we don't really know how to do yet, and we have a lot of different companies out there that have lots of different products that can be purchased and installed, and you know, it's not entirely clear how you would select those products and get them to work together. And so in that line, so I was wondering if Jed could mention, you know, what are the barriers towards figuring out what you need and how the challenges manifest in deploying those in a real network.
Well, I think one of the big barriers right now is that we really haven't had, up until now, a platform for collaboration. So there really wasn't a place that you could literally, you know, pretty easily bring together different companies to work on things. And that's what the gap we're hoping to fill with EPB Quantum Network. I think there are a number of other gaps related to, you know, there aren't necessarily standards for interoperability yet, and it's probably a little bit too early for us to like write them in stone, but we're probably getting to the point where we can start to at least look at what those parameters are. And again, you know, the software configurability of the network makes it very flexible so that as we do start to hone in on what those, you know, parameters should be, those standards should be, we'll be able to test them out. I think another big challenge right now toward commercialization is proof of investability. I mean, I've really enjoyed this. I am not a quantum expert. You probably have figured this out. But I have read pretty seriously. I'm very intrigued by it. And I think, you know, although there's a lot of excitement around quantum, it's very difficult for investors, particularly outside the industry, to say, that's a good technology, that's smoke and mirrors, forgive me. But I think having a situation where you can actually bring them together on a real network and prove investability is a very strong. So those are the things that I would highlight. I hope that's in the general vein of what you were looking for.
Yeah, thanks. So thank you for that. So to follow up on that, I'd like to ask Corey if he'd have anything else to add, especially, you know, given that he has a unique perspective on, you know, what's technically possible and the gap between, you know, building a physics experiment and actually making a product.
Yeah, I guess words of wisdom would be to just get out and do it, right? I mean, make it happen. Try to put things together and commercialize them as fast as you can. The industry is growing at such a rapid speed, but there's, you know, the ecosystem itself has to pull together. And if we don't, we're all going to fall into the valley of death. So we have to get over that hump. So competition, I think, is really important right now for the whole industry. So if we can gather into test beds and commercial networks where you can, you know, work together and keep your own IP, but work together to figure out the integration especially from a systems perspective. It's going to be really important.
Thanks for that. So Ray mentioned in his introduction that one of the use cases we think is really compelling is cybersecurity for energy infrastructure. And I'd like for him to expand upon that a little bit and maybe talk about how that could be built out into larger infrastructures.
Thank you, Nick. And you'll have to stop me because I can talk about this all day long. Energy infrastructures such as those operated by EPB face some pretty unique challenges. Many of us, I think, are familiar with thinking about security in an IT environment, an information technology environment. Energy infrastructure takes place in an operational technology, an OT environment, which is different in a number of key ways. One is the need to be able to guarantee or to make claims about security much further into the future than we're typically used to in an IT environment, right? We all typically, the lifetime of ownership of a cellular phone or a mobile device is about 2 or 3 years. Laptop computer, the same 2 or 3 years. Desktop, maybe 4 or 5. When control systems are installed in utility spaces, they need to last an awful lot longer, right? The amortization time for a substation or a power generating station is decades. It's not 2 or 3 years. We also, you can't reboot a substation the way that you reboot your phone to install updates. All of these things actually are substantial. It sounds trivial. These represent substantial changes in the security posture and the needs and requirements for the infrastructure on those systems. And we feel that quantum solutions are uniquely well suited to this case. So for instance, by placing the security guarantees in laws of physics, as opposed to the assumed computational complexity of a certain class of math problems, right? That's an awfully hard assumption to make 25 years into the future. We feel that we can provide assurances of security that last an awful lot better. As I touched on very briefly earlier, some of the downsides are the need to have optical communication channels between all the nodes in your network, or at least many of the nodes in your network. Well, the good news, EPB and many other utility companies around the nation and around the world already have installed optical fiber. Why? Well, because you already own trucks and poles. Like, why not? If you've got a cherry picker, why not put up fiber? Like, that's great. Let's capitalize on that wisdom and that foresight on their part to be able to take advantage. And of course, that there is some level of physical security around the nodes in the network, right? Electric power substations have fences. There are lots of rules and regulations about this, NERC and FERC, and you can speak about it far more eloquently than I. But for the point of view of a quantum, as an environment in which to install and deploy quantum systems, it's ideal. We've very much enjoyed the opportunity to do so and to leverage the wisdom of EPB, Quibitekk, and others in being able to create the devices that allow this to happen.
All right, so the next question's for Corey. Right now, we're operating in an environment where we have very few standards around quantum networking. And I was wondering if you might discuss whether that's a positive or a negative, or if they're just, not at all needed at this point.
Well, I think they're needed. One of the unique things about having, the EPB quantum network is the fact that you can work towards standards. Everybody can come in and kind of work together to integrate their systems and look at what the standards need to be. And that's an ongoing process. To have that availability of the system is going to make a big difference, though, where commercial companies can come in, and I think the standards will kind of float to the top based on the ones that are there first, but then also the ones that have something that works and can be utilized by the whole industry. And Jed, you mentioned some things about that earlier. I don't know if you want to expound on that a little bit.
I don't know that I can expound on it that much more, but because it is a software configurable network and we have several different ranges where you can set the parameters, we do think it is an optimal environment, to run a test, working with others, see, what those standards might be or what ranges might be useful in that regard. Actually, if I could, one of the things that occurred to me on the previous question about the barriers, one of the things I also think is connection with real live business communities, businesses outside of the quantum network that want to utilize these things for business optimization or cryptography or many other things that they could be sensing. And one of the things that we have done is build a local business consortium where we have a number of major companies that are interested in what we're doing, and they're interested in interacting with the companies that are coming to use the EPB Quantum Network to see if those technologies have application to their business as well.
Don't go too far. I've got another question for you. So, when you're the first to do something, you don't know what skills you need, and you kind of have to try stuff and figure out how to make it work. And so I was curious, what sort of skills gap do you see in the workforce, and how might we go about addressing that skills gap so that you can hire workers to be able to operationalize this technology?
I think one of our lessons learned is that, quantum, although there's the physics side of it certainly, quantum businesses are going to need all the different professionals that every other business needs, right? They're going to need, CPAs, marketing people, all that kind of good stuff. One of the big gaps that we've seen in particular, though, is things like engineers, network engineers, software engineers, these kinds of specialties that need that extra bit of quantum specialization. In other words, it's a broader application, a broader skill set, but then we need to prepare people specifically to take that skill set and apply it to quantum. So that's the one I would point toward.
Okay, thank you. So next question is a little bit more technical. So I'm going to preface it with a definition. So we've heard a lot about quantum cybersecurity that uses things like QKD. There are other protocols out there as well. Right now, the chief competitor is post-quantum cryptography. And so post-quantum cryptography is really just classical cryptography. There's nothing quantum about it. But people believe that it won't be vulnerable once there's a significant quantum computer. And so this question's for Ray. I would like to have Ray expand upon the idea of, well, if you have post-quantum cryptography, do we even need quantum key distribution and other quantum versions of cryptography also?
That's a great question, Nick. To tee up just a little bit more, post-quantum cryptography is a set of computations, mathematical algorithms, which are believed to remain difficult even in the presence of an adversarial quantum computer. And we can go into some details, and I didn't bring slides, but I'm not a mathematician, but I hang out with them sometimes. I don't see it as an either or. I see it as a both and. There will be many, many applications in which quantum technologies, explicitly quantum technologies, such as QKD and the others that you mentioned, provide value. And there are many cases in which they simply just don't obtain. You can't apply, right? If you don't have an optical link, that won't work. So we're very happy. We keep very close tabs on developments in post-quantum cryptography, mathematics. We contribute to them as appropriate. But I think that there's enough space in the world of research to do both. And in particular, I view our quantum technologies as a valuable hedge against adversary, future technology surprise in the field of PQC. I think many of us know that NIST is currently in the process of essentially a down selection process in which cryptographers from around the world propose and submit cryptographic algorithms which are claimed to be secure against adversarial use of a quantum computer. That's now in its fourth round, if I'm not mistaken, very nearly converging upon answers. And this is good. This is exactly the right way that we can establish and make claims of security. It's how, for instance, AES and DES and ECDSA and other good cryptographic algorithms have all been selected in the world. So going forward, I think that's wonderful. I also think that there is time and space and funding available to develop a hedge. And that's where I see this technology being really crucial. Thanks.
Thanks, Ray. So this is the last question I have before we ask for questions from the audience. So Oak Ridge National Lab, Los Alamos National Lab, Quibitekk, and EPB have been working together for a number of years. And so I wanted to ask, from the end user and from the vendor standpoint, ask both Jed and Corey, what makes that partnership successful? What have been the key things that have enabled us to go from, really fairly basic science questions to something that actually is a real-world operational entity.
So I think what impressed us so much with EPB and what really enticed the overall partnership was the fact that they had this amazing vision. And it started in 2008 when they started doing the fiber at EPB. And they at the time they said it was a 1 gig fiber network that they were going to install, and everybody was saying, "What do you need a gig for?" And now they've got 25 gig to the household in their whole 600 square mile territory. So that vision now has translated from a gig city perspective to a quantum city perspective. And that has been rare for us to find anyway as a small company trying to bridge the gap from where our current technologies are into quantum. So, and the one key part of that is the industry-led component of the EPP network. So we've got Quantum Opus for the detectors that are, specific off-the-shelf equipment. We've got a Lyro software that's, basically off-the-shelf, ready to go. Our equipment the same way. So EPB saw that concept and was willing to take the risk and bring in those vendors to put together the first commercial network. So, and it's been great. And it's really the vision that I've seen that's made the difference.
And I'll speak from the other end. So I think we feel very fortunate. And from our perspective, technology is very important. But our mission is basically to enhance the quality of life for our community. So our goal is to take technology and apply it to human situations and improve human situations. And we've been very impressed in our partnerships with ORNL, LANL, Quibitekk, and others. These are folks that could spend their time and do spend their time in the lab coming up with, theoretical solutions, but they get really excited about an opportunity to apply it in a practical situation and figure out how it can become a real-world solution. I think one of the things that we have been able to bring to the table is that we can be incredibly flexible about, working with researchers, working with people who have a technology, and engaging people in our community that can support that. And I think probably Nick and Ray would attest to that we can kind of bend over backwards and get things done in our community that in a larger community, or if you were dealing with a big corporate entity, would be nearly impossible, like building out a bunch of fiber optic test loops for a technology on short notice and things like that. So,
All right, thank you. So now I'll open it up to audience questions. We have time probably for one or two.
My question's for Ray and Nick, since I talked to the gentleman on this side. Scott Packer with Quibitekk. Given the success from the SETS program, the collaboration that the four organizations represented up here, against the headwinds introduced to QKE by the Department of Defense and NSA, do you expect there to be funding allocated to pursue like projects out of the recent legislation that's freed up funding? Department of Energy has been very forward-thinking in that, and in addition to PQC. But will we see more projects potentially mirroring that success?
Well, I would say that, you don't expect legislation to be so prescriptive as to specify a particular solution, right? So I think that they're going to identify the need, and then they're going to rely on the Department of Energy and other research organizations to put out calls for innovative ideas to solve those challenges. And I certainly am not done writing proposals for this. So I would say that, the challenges that are out there, one of the big problems we have with quantum key distribution, even though it was invented nominally in 1984, and it's sort of the best known quantum communications protocol, it really didn't start to take up any kind of speed in the community until the mid-1990s when we saw Shor's algorithm get published. And it's been sort of slowly building, less so in the US, but certainly in the international community. And if there is a technology out there that is a potential game changer, and it's really developed everywhere else in the world, I think the U.S. owes itself to understand that technology really well. So I think that there's going to be further research on that topic. Ray?
Real quick, being mindful of time and that I'm right before lunch. We focused today in our comments on applications and security. That's great, but there are many others to come, right? So, I mean, just big picture, 30,000-foot view. Quantum computers are being built, right? We can disagree about when quantum computers hit certain milestones on certain calendar dates, whatever. I mean, I don't mean to say whatever, but we can have those disagreements. I don't think that there's much question that this is going to happen. There will be many. There will be different. They will be geographically disparate. They're going to be in different places. Just as regular classical networking mentioned in the late 1990s really tremendously amplified the value of individual desktop computers, we might reasonably expect that the ability to exchange quantum information between quantum computers that are very far apart is going to dramatically increase their computational power, their utility, their value to the customer, right? That's Metcalfe's law. The volume of a network that contains n nodes goes as n squared. So, you know, aside from security, we're seeing a tremendous interest in the kind of quantum communication supported by these networks. I mentioned, you know, why that's useful to the utilities, but setting aside EPB's job as a utility, if it's also a network information, a network platform provider, right, that's the same value we can expect to see further investment in that going forward for a lot of applications. Thanks.
Yeah, and with that, I'll close with this parting thought that, you know, Ray mentioned Metcalfe's law, which is the square of the number of connected users is sort of the value of the network, one of classical network. But if we connect quantum objects with a quantum network, we expect to have an exponential scaling. That means that even if we connect a small number of quantum objects, we can have something that's much more powerful than a classical network of the same quantum objects. And with that, please thank my standing panelists for their participation.